growth number. We've got younger individuals concerned with how to become wealthy. So we'll talk a little bit about that. A, whether you should be obsessed with that, and B, how you would go about it, which might be the opposite of what people think.
Exactly.
And some news. Xavier had a couple weeks ago had talked about an article about how basically all these people were going to be facing higher RMDs because their 401ks went up, and how this was actually a good thing. And so some Social Security recipients may receive higher tax bills this year. We'll talk about why that's not a bad thing, and trying to dig into that. Don't panic about news articles you may read. So a lot of stuff to cover.
Exactly.
On today's show, but it's gonna be
It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. And as for the younger individuals getting anxious about getting rich, I mean, I feel like I don't think that's necessarily a Gen Z thing. I feel like that's been throughout history. I think when you're young, you're kind of like, I want to get rich fast.
Yeah.
Everyone wants that get rich fast scheme. In fact, even older people do. I mean, that's why
I think
gambling
it's kind
exists.
of exacerbated now, because you go on Instagram, they see all these influencers, and they're like, of course, the idea of vacation is I go to Amalfi, I go to these like super expensive places, and you're like, those people are like paid to go to those places.
Well, not even just paid. You have to be careful, because social media, people can fake
Exactly.
things. You know, so they can look like, well, look, yeah, they're always going on vacation to these exotic places, but in reality, they basically actually have no money. They're just spending all their money to go on that vacation, and then get the professional photographer and give the appearance as if they have money.
Exactly.
You know, and then suddenly, then you're right. Then they get the sponsor for the hair shampoo. It's like, I use this shampoo to make my hair look great on the Amalfi Coast.
Exactly. Hey, sometimes we've seen some of them. Like you're in a small place in Europe and you see.
Oh, in Greece, it was everywhere.
Everywhere.
Well, we called them, there were a lot of, let's be honest, the Instagram boyfriends that it's like, literally the girlfriend was like standing in the place, having the
fancy
wind blow.
dress. He's like in jeans.
The guy's like having to take 100 pictures. She's like, oh, no, get this angle. So he's a back of, she's like, okay,
and
now
it's not on Instagram. Like, it's not for a photo album.
And I felt so bad because it felt like the guy was just like on a dog collar. Like literally, it's just like, okay, take this picture, now take this angle. And the guy looks like he's miserable. He's like, man, I'm in Greece.
It doesn't look like he's on vacation.
He's not.
Yeah.
I can tell you, dairy farming is not a good way to get rich quick.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Today y Mañana. I'm Alex. This is Michael.
Happy to be here.
We're very excited to have you joining us this morning. And as you can hear, we're going to be joined very shortly in the show by Ben Beitler from Greenbrook Farm, which is indeed a dairy farm. So we'd be looking forward to that in just a few minutes here. We've got a great show lined up for you. He's going to be joining us. We'll have some finance topics later in the show. Glad to be here.
Happy to be here, Alex.
With you. Glad to be here on the I Love Seville Network. Appreciate, of course, all our great partners: Emergent Financial Services, Matias Young Realty, Credit Serious Insurance, Castle Hill Cider, Forward Adelante. Love just really being able to partner with so many great businesses here in Charlottesville, Virginia. So we got a lot going on.
And the best part too, winter's over. It's spring's here, right?
It feels like it, doesn't it?
Spring's here. Yeah, there's no more cold days.
Exactly. Well, the funny thing is, last night it changed, but last night I was checking the weather forecast for Friday, and it was predicting 78 degrees. And I said, what are we just going to skip spring and go straight to summer? And, thankfully that has been
it's been adjusted. But it's still like 70 tomorrow.
It's going to be 70 tomorrow.
The problem is with this weather, Alex, do you get a chilled café con leche or a hot café con leche?
That's the challenge.
Our viewers are wondering what's Alex going to recommend.
I know. I would still say with the rain, still go with the warm café con leche.
It's pretty humid out there. The AC, when we were driving here, the AC turned on your car automatically.
It's true. So it's that time that you can choose your preference.
Can you have a lukewarm café con leche? Doesn't sound right.
I feel like either hot or cold is kind of your lukewarm. Lukewarm seems indecisive. Like, do you want cold or do you want hot?
So what's Alex's official thing that before people sit down, they need to know?
Get your hot café con leche, settle into a cozy spot. It's still rainy and dark. You're gonna feel cold if you drink a cold café con leche. would be my suspicion. And I mean, we certainly have some good news relative to last time. Last week, we were sitting here saying, oh man, UVA basketball, not doing so great. And then they won 3 in a row.
Well, it's because you and I gave a pep talk. We were like, hey, come on, you guys can play better. Tony better figure it out. And they were watching today in Mañana, and they made the adjustments. I mean, we noticed. We watched the game. We're like, that's what I was like, that Alex told them to do that. And it worked.
Exactly. But it's been pretty. I mean, since then, they beat Virginia Tech, which was good.
Yes. Always good.
They then won their first road game of the season.
Of the season or in the ACC
Their first
season?
true road game. I think they had won like some neutral spot games, but I don't think they had won a road game all season, like in the opponent's stadium. So they did that, and then they got revenge last night. It took overtime, but they got revenge against NC State for having crushed them a few weeks ago. So we beat NC State. So that was nice. So, I mean, we're back to over 500 in the ACC, got some wins.
I mean, our record is, what we have, like 5 losses? Or
I think 5 losses. So, I mean, it's not a bad record. The issue is one of those is that loss to Notre Dame. It was like one of the worst teams in basketball. So it's a bad loss.
Yeah, I know, but they could still turn it around. I mean, you look at the schedule outside of, I mean, they got obviously one game against UNC and one game against Duke. If they can manage to sneak one of those and just have one loss the rest of the year, at least you give yourself a shot. If you have a good ACC tournament run.
Yeah.
You
I mean, if they have one loss, to get to one loss for the rest of the year, they're probably going to have to be 2 out of 3 of Duke, UNC, and Clemson, which are the 3 good teams.
Oh, Clemson, too?
In the ACC. So they're going to have to beat 2 out of those 3 teams, which is probably what it would take. I've read some articles that might be what it would take to get to the NCAA tournament.
Got it.
Probably not. It can't have any other bad losses, and probably going to win 2 out of 3 against some combination of Duke, UNC, and
It's doable,
which is
though.
doable.
It's doable.
Which is
I think they're better than they've played in some of their losses.
I think so too. I think we've got some good players. We've got some talent. They just have to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, the defense has been good. It's just every once in a while the offense just can't figure it out. As long as the defense can keep it close and offensively they could get more people involved and not just feel like it's just Reese Beekman doing everything.
Exactly. Already have some people tuning in this morning. Bill McChesney, thanks for watching the show this morning. Ali Raza, thanks for watching the show this morning. Dr. Elizabeth Irby, watching the show this morning. So always appreciate our fantastic guests joining us. And speaking of fantastic guests, we're excited to welcome to the show this morning Ben Beitler. He is one of the founders, I think one of the owners of Creambrook Farm. So Ben, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Really excited.
It's our pleasure.
So, I mean, for those who haven't met you yet, so tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and how, because I know Creambrook Farm is like a family business, the family's involved, you, your wife, your kids. Tell us a little bit about how you first started it, how you first went down the path of starting it.
Yeah, so the Cliff Notes, to make a long story short, is I did not grow up farming. Actually grew up in northern Maryland, north of Bel Air, close to the Mason-Dixon line. I grew up, my grandparents used to go to farm shows all the time when I was a kid, and they would take me along. And I fell in love with tractors and animals and all those things. Graduated high school, attended Towson University outside of Baltimore, because that's what I was supposed to do, or at least I was told. Was getting good grades, but I was literally bored to tears with college. It drove me crazy. Like I would go to college, I'd come home and split firewood and sell firewood on the side just to like stay sane with the classwork. And at that point in time, I came across the writings of Joel Salatin over at Polyface Farm.
Yep.
It really reignited that interest I'd always had in farming, but I'd always been told, like, well, you can't farm. You don't have a farm. Your family's not farmers.
Yes, exactly.
Most people might not realize this, but farming is kind of the American royalty. Like, you're either born into it or you have a really long, bloody struggle to get into it.
So which way? We know which way you
We
went,
know
right?
which way I took, yeah. Polyface had an apprenticeship program. I applied, moved in 2007 from Maryland, quit college in between college semesters, sat my parents down. It's like, hey guys, I just canceled all my college courses because I could get a full refund. I'm taking my summer job back, and so I can move to Virginia and go start farming. And the reaction was mixed, to say the best. But anyway, I moved down. Didn't really have any idea what part of agriculture I might end up in, but just did the apprenticeship program, worked for multiple other farms, just kind of like tasting and trying different things to see what caught my interest. And I found I had a real love for cows. Really, really enjoyed cattle. And for whatever reason, milking was something that, and raw milk was something I was really drawn to. So in 2012, my wife Kristen and I married. As soon as we got back from our honeymoon, we borrowed her dad's truck and a cattle trailer and went to Pennsylvania and bought our first couple dairy cows. Wow. We were renting a small little farm in Swope. started milking there. That's where Creambrook really kind of took off. We were still doing some pasture poultry and some other things on contract for another farm at that time period, but the dairy was the long-term goal. We operated there for 2 years, realized that we didn't know what we were doing, so we kind of temporarily shuttered Creambrook, and over the next 3 years worked for multiple different farms, 2 of which were in Pennsylvania, kind of getting my quote-unquote master's degree in dairy specifically. It wasn't a literal master's degree, but just getting experience.
Experience.
Yeah, getting experience. And then in 2017, we got the opportunity to come down to our farm in Middlebrook. So we relocated from Pennsylvania back to Virginia. My wife's from Virginia originally, so that's where her family's from. And started Creambrook with the intentions of certifying as an organic dairy, shipping milk commercially to Organic Valley. We did not have ambitions of becoming a raw milk operation, but 2017 was a really terrible year for commodity dairy, and we were kind of caught in the crosshairs. Like, here we are trying to get started, the market's awful,
Against you,
like
yeah.
we're going to go belly up, literally right out of the gate if we don't adapt and make some major changes. So we had worked for some raw milk operations, we were familiar with raw milk. We're like, well, we know how to do this, so I guess we'll start trying that. So I think it was June or July 2017, we started our herd share. It was like 30 folks. In Stanton and Charlottesville were the 2 areas that we kind of originally got started with. Middlebrook, where our farm is located, is just outside of Stanton, just southwest of it. So
got it.
maybe 50 minutes from here. And then things took off from there. We found there was a real need for the raw milk. Of course, we were highly motivated too. Like, we had just acquired this farm.
Of course.
Nothing
yeah.
will motivate you like a mortgage payment.
Necessity, right?
Yep, necessity. And so we worked aggressively growing it. And then when COVID hit in 2020, and everybody had kind of this scare over food accessibility, it like blew the lid off of our business. I mean, we all suddenly just got
you're delivering
inundated.
milk.
Yes, we just got inundated. And we thought at that point in time that this is a one-time blip in the radar, just because of the unique situation everybody was going through. But COVID was followed up by a real interest in people and how can we improve our own health? What can I do to make myself resilient? Not just to COVID, but to anything. So you saw people joining gyms and eating cleaner and, focusing on how they can improve themselves. And raw milk really kind of fit well with that. And there's just been an explosion in interest and demand for raw milk since then, which we've struggled to keep up with, quite honestly. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Just love. What would you say? You started with about 30 people. You said where are you up to now in terms of like?
We're serving around 2,500 families.
Wow.
Yeah.
2,500 cow shares. That's amazing.
It's crazy.
So the process of raw milk, because I know the milk you buy, for example, in a grocery store, it's pasteurized.
Yes.
So what's the process of you for getting raw milk? Is it literally just straight from the cow, you put into a bucket, and then you put into a bottle? Or is there anything else? I'm
It's
curious.
a lot more complicated than that.
I figured it was.
Yes. So first, let's define raw milk. So raw milk is milk that is straight from the cow that has not gone through the pasteurization process. Now, at our farm, we have a stainless steel system where our cows come in. We have a prepping and cleaning process where we clean the teats off. We do a full inspection of the cow, make sure there's no issues with that individual cow before the milker is hooked up to her, at which point the milk is drawn from the cow, goes through a filtration system that we try to get them as clean as we possibly can, but this is a micron filter. Like, it'll catch teeny tiny little things that may have gotten missed. Then it goes through what's called a plate chiller. It looks like a car radiator, and what it does is it has well water running through it, so it takes the milk, which comes out of the cow at 101 degrees, and it chills it instantly down to about 60, about well water temperature. From there, the milk goes into a stainless steel tank that has refrigeration lines that go back to a commercial compressor, and is chilled down to about 33 to 34 degrees. The goal is to chill the milk as fast as possible. The faster you chill it, the longer the shelf life, the longer the freshness. So there's kind of this race to get the milk cool as fast as possible. And also, most pathogens cannot survive cold. So, or they don't thrive in cold. So the sooner you chill it, it's another defense system we have within our systems to make the milk as safe as possible.
That's incredible. So it's so much that goes into that. What is kind of like the shelf life of? So like you get a bottle delivered. How long typically? I mean, if you've refrigerated it.
Yeah, if you refrigerate it properly and all those things, we like to try to get to 2 weeks. Like, we guarantee 10 days, but 2 weeks is kind of our goal. You do lose a few days because you have it getting bottled and transported and people coming to pick it up. But we like to see 10 days in the customer's possession. Now, honestly, most of it's long gone.
Yeah.
Before the next week rolls around and they get a fresh delivery. But if the milk is clean and everything's being done properly, we've had milk go as long as 3 weeks.
Interesting. So you just talked about the delivery. So how is the process if someone's interested in purchasing your raw milk?
Yeah, so Virginia is a little bit of a interesting place when it comes to raw milk and access. So you can't just buy raw milk in Virginia. It's illegal for me as the farmer to sell you raw milk. It's not illegal for the consumer to possess it. It's weird. It's kind of like fireworks. But anyway, can't sell it. You can have it.
Yeah.
Don't light it.
You could just leave it somewhere and I could pick it up.
Yeah, exactly. But the way it's done in Virginia is what's called a herd share. So it's similar to a CSA, where a member will purchase a share of the herd, almost like buying a stock in a company like Google or Facebook or something like that. And in proportion to your ownership, you get dividends or a return of ownership, which in our case is the milk, the end product. And then how we, the farmers, are paid is we're paid for the service of managing the herd, bottling, distributing, and all those other things. So technically, we serve 2,500 member owners, if you want to call it that way, that we're basically providing the milk, and then we have some extra products we do, like the kefir, which I know you want to talk about here a little bit soon. But we get paid for the service of providing that. So we can't actually sell the milk; it has to go specifically to members, and that's the way Virginia handles it. It's different in each state, like Pennsylvania, California, Washington. You actually can buy off of a store shelf. Like it's legalized in those states, and then you have other states like North Carolina where it's sold in store shelves, but it's sold as pet milk. It's not sold as not for human consumption. Everybody knows what's going on. It's kind of a paper charade.
So you have to go to like the pet section to purchase the raw milk?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's funny.
Well, listen, some of that pet food, we used to have a Westie, and we actually fed him raw meat.
Raw meat?
Yeah. Like organic raw meat.
Yeah.
And it was it looked like it was like
It was
good
like
stuff.
human quality.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like really good stuff. So sometimes the pets eat better than we do. I'm not going to lie.
absolutely.
Well, yes, and that's a whole other topic. But yeah, it's one of those things where each state handles it differently. This is the way it's done in Virginia. It's a little bit clunky, but it's a subscription. You purchase in the herd share. You have your weekly dues that you pay, and but the nice thing is, like, especially during the supply issues with COVID, is when you're a member, like you're in. It's a weekly subscription, same as a magazine or a gym membership, unless you cancel it or you change or alter it, something like that. So this is something we work really, really hard. Is like if somebody gets on with us, we want to make it as consistent. We want to be as reliable as the mailman, or more reliable than the mailman. As far as like, hey, your milk's going to be here every week at this set time.
Exactly. So is the purchase of the herd share, is that like a one-time? So
Yeah.
you made a one-time buying
Yeah,
a
buy-in,
share of
yes,
a cow,
yes.
essentially, and then you pay essentially a weekly amount, which is basically the milk to be delivered.
The service
to the service to get the milk to the place where you'll pick it up.
Yes, correct.
And you guys have a lot of drop-off
Yes.
places, so it's not as though if you're in one part of Charlottesville, like you have to drive 30 minutes to Stanton to pick up milk.
Yeah, we have a spot in Ruckersville, and then all the way up through 29. So it's a busy system.
Absolutely. So what are some of, because obviously I think this might be a new topic for some people that are maybe used to just going to the store and all the milk in Virginia that you go to the store is pasteurized, most of it's homogenized.
Yes.
So what would you say are some of the either myths or misconceptions that you encounter that people have this notion of raw milk that are incorrect?
Well, let's have a quick history lesson, because I think it kind of helps explain this. So everybody drank raw milk for thousands and thousands of years, no questions asked, didn't think anything differently of it. You come up, fast forward to the 1860s up through like the 1890s, we have the industrialization of the Western world. You have people all suddenly moving in very confined spaces with little to no sanitization. I mean, if you looked at like Victorian era photos of inner cities, it's awful. And all of a sudden, all these foodborne illnesses start popping up when you had this massive urbanization happening. And raw milk was one of the key problem foods. Like you had extremely high infant mortality. You had people getting sick on a regular basis. So there became this real push among the legislatures and also wealthy people who were philanthropists. How do you say that word? I'm terrible.
Philanthropists.
Yeah, sorry. who are like, we need to clean up milk. We need to figure out what to do about this. And basically, there was two opposing sides that came out to how to address this issue. One was, we'll pasteurize the milk, we cook it, because magically when we cook it, the illness issue goes away. And the other was supported by a man named Henry Coit, who had lost a child to milk-borne illnesses, who said, I think there's still great value in raw milk. Let's see what we can do to clean up the farms. So Henry Coit went out, got a bunch of medical doctors together. They created the Medical Milk Commission, and they went around and started certifying certain farms where they actually had doctors visiting the dairies. This is the 1890s, this is early, and setting standards and practices for how do we make a dairy farm clean. A lot of these practices were later adopted by the USDA for the foundation for what became Grade A, which is the standard that almost all farms are held to for milk production. But there was basically, for decades, this coexistence between pasteurized milk and then what they called certified milk. It wasn't necessarily called raw milk, and the interesting thing was the certified milk was actually used extensively by hospitals and certain doctors. Like the Mayo Clinic actually had a dairy farm specifically supplying them with raw milk for medical research. And there's published papers you can find online still from the Mayo Clinic on different research that was done by leading doctors at that time with raw milk to try to address certain issues. There was actually a farm in New Jersey that milked over 1,600 cows. Granted, this is the 1940s. That was supplying raw milk directly by rail into New York City, Philadelphia, of course, New Jersey, down into Baltimore. It was actually allegedly the favorite drink of President Franklin Roosevelt. And when he went to the Yalta Conference during World War II, he specifically ordered to have fresh milk from that dairy supplied during his overseas trips for World War II.
Amazing.
But post-World War II, you had this push, not just culturally, but also industry-wise, to kind of homogenize society and everything like this. And there was a massive push to get rid of raw milk. A lot of states passed laws where the only way you could legally sell milk was through pasteurization. Virginia was one of the states. Now, there were some states that didn't change those laws, like California. Raw milk has always been legal in California. They never altered that law, but they're the outlier in that situation. And over time, raw milk got pretty much squeezed out by regulation. And also there was a lot of public campaigns where people would dig up all these horrible statistics from the 1880s to the 1920s and be like, why would you give this to your kid? You're a terrible person if you do. So that was kind of the major push. And then starting in the 1990s, early 2000s, you had people starting to get really interested in the paleo diet and eating more traditional. And raw milk kind of started to see a rebirth during that time period. And then since 2020, it's just absolutely exploded where you have, actually board certified medical doctors who are talking like, hey, this is actually an important food. People should be consuming it. Where before that was unheard of.
How interesting. So what are some of the benefits that when they talk about why to go back to raw, what would be some of the reasons to return to raw milk?
So real simple. We like to think of ourselves as a single cell organism. I mean, I'm Ben. I don't like to think about the fact that I'm actually inhabited by millions and millions of bacteria and enzymes and all these things. I like to just think of myself as Ben. But the fact of the matter is, all those millions of little critters, they need to eat too. And the thing is, if you're just feeding yourself food that's been sterilized, it's not bioavailable to feed our gut biome, all of our gut bacteria, all the different things that we need for us to have healthy functioning systems. So when you get a living food like raw milk, or even something that's been supercharged like kefir with probiotics and stuff like that, now you're feeding your gut biome. Now there's more and more medical research coming out all the time about how a healthy gut is key to a healthy immune system. It's key to mental health. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to get into all the research. But you just go look up PubMed or one of these other places online, and there's so much interesting data coming out all the time about the gut and what it can do for human health. So eating gut healthy foods, which raw milk definitely fits that description, is key to. And that's not even talking about the minerals and vitamins and stuff. We're just talking about simply the bacterial end. You're thinking, why would I want to drink bacteria? Well, whether we realize it or not, there's bacteria on everything we touch and consume.
Same reason why you would eat yogurt.
Exactly.
A little yogurt is filled with bacteria.
Yes. So, obviously you don't eat the bad bacteria, but the more your system is resilient and strengthened, the more easier you can. It's just like working out in the gym. Like, if you work in the gym, you build strong muscles, and if you trip and fall, the chances of a serious injury are a lot less than if you don't do those things. So it's the same thing. Are you basically exercising your gut, if you want to put it that way, stimulating it, encouraging it, nourishing it, feeding it, all of those things.
And you also happened to mention kefir, which we had talked about a little bit. And I'm curious, so for those our viewers who don't know, what exactly is it? What's the process of making it, and what kind of actually got you interested in?
Yeah. So kefir is traditionally a drink from Siberia. A lot of the nomadic Siberian tribes are the ones that kind of discovered it and encouraged it, and then it migrated down through Russia into Europe. It's a very popular drink in Europe, and there's lots of different variations with different names of similar drinks. It's kind of become popular here in the United States the last 20, 30 years. I mean, there's other places where it's been around longer. But basically, kefir is like a supercharged version, if you want to put it, especially if it's a raw kefir. Like, because there's a lot of pasteurized kefir for sale in the store, but that milk was completely killed off, and then they re-inoculated the cultures into this, where with a raw kefir, you've already taken this very available product, and you've just kind of like spiced it up, for lack of a better explanation. But the other thing, too, is you have to think, once again, historical context. Pre-refrigeration, if you were going to consume a dairy product, you had to either drink it fresh, because it was going to sour extremely quickly without refrigeration and sanitary equipment, or you need to sour it. Souring has always been the long-term way of preserving a product, outside of like making cheese and butter. But something like a kefir would be a product where you could take this thing with you, you could kind of continually be culturing it, and it would preserve it, and it would be safe to consume. So it's kind of a little bit, that's where it came from. It has a little bit of like a tart taste to it.
How is it soured? What do you add?
So we inoculate with 12 different forms of, what's the right word for it? Probiotics, and the names are like as long as this table, so please don't ask me to repeat them. There's some Latin thing, but there's specific bacteria that are introduced that create the fermentation process, and you can actually make kefir yourself. It's super easy. There's the commercial form, which is what we have to do because of making fresh batches all the time, where you actually use an inoculant, or you can make it on your own kitchen table, where you have what's called kefir grains. It's like a SCOBY that you add to the milk. And you kind of refresh, same as like sourdough, you're constantly kind of feeding it and refreshing it. And there's like the mother, they don't call it the mother in kefir, that's the sourdough term. But you're constantly kind of like, and we've, in the past, past and present, we have quite a few customers who make their own kefir using our milk.
How interesting.
Where they've acquired the grains. There's places you can buy the grains. We don't currently carry them. But you can kind of create this yourself.
It's amazing. I wouldn't have thought that that's what you do. And of course, you get that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
No, so you get that. I mean, obviously, you have the health benefit, obviously, already of the raw milk, but now you've added those probiotics that so many people would otherwise go into the store and get a probiotic pill and try to compensate for the lack of it, but you can literally just drink it right there in the food that you're consuming.
And I love the ingenuity of having the probiotics this way you can carry it with you. It's kind of like, I always love I don't want to say ancient methods of how we used to kind of think about food, but it's like even with cheese, it's like we said, no, wait a second, let's age it. And then cheese, I mean, it takes so long for cheese to really kind of go bad, especially depending on the type of cheese. Versus, like you said, like with milk, it's like if it comes out fresh, back then without refrigeration, probably 2-3 days, it spoils.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you found ways to kind of like preserve your food, like salting fish and everything like that, salting meat.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, but when you put it into historical context, it's really interesting when you start realizing, this is why they did it the way they did it. But
and how it made sense. Nicholas Zerpe watching the show this morning, he has a question. He's a big, his wife makes kombucha, so he wants to know, is it the same SCOBY as kombucha, or it's a kind of a different, so you have to get something specifically for
Yes, it's
kefir?
completely separate.
Okay.
Completely separate.
So so Nick, you have to get a new...
It's similar, and then once again, it's a drink where you're adding probiotics to it and making it to where it's really bioavailable for your gut.
Exactly, but he would have to get specifically kefir grains.
Yes.
There's your answer. Nicholas Zerpe, Rosalia Todaro, watching the show this morning. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. So, I mean, even with the fact that we've talked about the historical process, you guys also there's a number of precautions. I mean, your milk is tested and so forth. There's a lot of things that go to still make it certified and safe.
So let's talk about food safety here then. I think there's a misconception that all food is safe. And the honest truth is, even highly processed food is not safe. Like if you go to foodsafetynews.com and you look, there's articles every day on a specific outbreak, whether it's related to lettuce or hot dogs or ice cream.
Don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to get nightmares, just get on some of these medical websites and
Well,
read through it.
the worst thing is then you're going to go there and then it's like outbreak on this ice cream. You're like, I just had that last night.
I know, exactly. It's like watching the car warranty thing. There's a recall on my car. Oh, no.
Great.
So the thing is, like, with food, we're kind of in the risk mitigation business. Like, I wish I could say we can make it 100,000% perfectly safe. There can never, ever, ever be a problem with that. Unfortunately, there are some people out there who say, like, well, raw milk's a perfect food. There can never be a problem with that. And that's unfortunately just not correct. It's just not paying attention to the data. So the thing is, at Creambrook, we're actually members of the Raw Milk Institute. It's a global organization that is dedicated to raw milk research and looking at what are the best protocols we can put in place to make milk as safe as possible. So that's why we have our own lab on the farm. We're doing our own testing. We test every single batch of milk before it heads out. The tests we use, without getting in the weeds on the scientific end of it, are basically population counts. We can't test for specific pathogens. Right now, you need like a state lab to actually be able to do those tests. They're very expensive and they take a long time to do. But we can do population counts where we can kind of get an idea of what the cleanliness of the milk is. So, for example, I live in Middlebrook. There's like 200 people out there. If I throw my keys, my wallet on the dashboard of my car, the chances of my car getting stolen still exist, but are very, very, very low. If I do that in New York City, a city of millions, my car is guaranteed to be gone by the time you get back. So it's kind of a similar thing. We're looking at population tests where it's like, if we know if we keep the numbers super, super low, our risk mitigation is working and we have, it's clean and we have a very, very low chance of there actually being a problem. Now, the cool thing is, in the same way that our cell phone has become a compression of libraries and research labs and all these other things that we've seen over the last 30 years, there's the same kind of technological compression going in within science right now. And there's some really cool new lab technology coming out probably next year where on farm we'll actually be able to do pathogen testing safely on the farm.
Wow.
So this is why we're part of the Raw Milk Institute, and we're looking at like what are the things that we can constantly be learning and doing and improving to make our system as safe as possible. Now there's still risks to raw milk. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you there aren't, and that's why we always tell people, like, look, it's a personal decision on whether you feel comfortable with raw milk. If you're coming off of chemotherapy or something where you've had your system completely wiped out, might not be the best thing for you to try something that's that biologically active.
Exactly.
Or you've got a compromised immune system, or we always tell people we're here to support you on your food journey. We're not here to tell you like
Which way to go.
you need to drink Creambrook raw milk. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge fan of it. I believe firmly in our product, but we always tell people like, hey, you need to make an informed decision based on what you think's best for you and your family. We're here to support you, whether it's as a customer of Creambrook or not. But you do have to take into consideration that there are some risks to it, and that's something that like us and there's some other raw milk dairies that are doing some extremely wonderful work now on with their own labs, techniques, procedures. But the problem is there's a lot of raw milk floating around out there too that's also not as cared for. And I encourage people, like, if you're going to purchase raw milk, like, have a relationship with your farmer, know where it's coming from, ask informed questions about, like, do they have procedures and processes? Like, we're not inspected by the state because the state doesn't want to legalize raw milk. But even though we're not inspected by the state, we still have built redundancies in our systems and have accountability within our system with our own laboratory, with our own standards and stuff like that, being members of the Raw Milk Institute. So if you're going to get raw milk from somebody, make sure that there's some accountability in the process. They're not just out there kind of sticking their finger in the wind and hoping everything's going to turn out fine at the end of the day. It's a serious business. We take it very serious. And it's our joy to see people who are thriving, because raw milk is usually the first step for somebody on a bigger food journey, where they're looking to like start eating cleaner or working out or doing things. So it's cool that we kind of get to be a lot of times that first step towards kind of pushing them to like a healthy lifestyle.
Exactly. That's fantastic. Well, Ben, this has been an absolute pleasure. Where can people if people are interested in learning more and checking you guys out, where's the best way where to find you?
Yeah, you can simply look us up online at Creambrook Farm, CREAMBROOK farm.com. We have a wonderful
Super
website
easy.
that my wife has spent hours perfecting.
It is a nice website.
Very
Easy-
nice, yes.
Easy to navigate.
We have a newsletter where if you want to get weekly updates on the farm, and a lot of our customer-related news as far as when milk's available at certain places would be there. You can sign up for the newsletter on the website. We are also on Instagram. We aren't on there as much as some people are. It's kind of more of just where we post little random updates of what's going on. But yeah, the website's kind of, if you want to find out more, that's the place to go.
Perfect. Greenbrookfarm.com. Well, Ben, thanks again
Yes,
so
thank
much
you
for
so
coming
much,
on.
Ben.
Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I always learn so much, right?
Yeah,
When you
that was great. Just to learn a kind of like first a little history about the raw milk and how it ended up getting pasteurized and all that. But yeah, to see Ben talk about it, you could very clear his passion for it.
Yep.
He wants to kind of share the milk around, and I'm telling you what, I'm kind of interested. I'm
Yeah, I know.
going to be
I
going
thought
to
you might be. I thought you might be.
greenbrookfarm.com after the show.
I said to myself,
Yeah.
I did.
You know me a little too well, Alex. That's the problem.
I know you well. So transitioning from there, he mentioned, it's funny, Ben mentioned at the beginning, he did a great analogy of kind of
Yeah.
owning a share of a cow versus owning a share of
And
stock.
like the milk was like the dividend.
Exactly,
It
like
was
the
very
dividend,
creative,
which is a great way of showing it, and leads beautifully into like different finance topics.
Yeah,
that
you
we,
jumped up and down when you heard that.
I
You're
was
like,
like,
oh, wait a
yes,
second, I
okay,
get
I
that.
have- I have my
got that
built-in
reference.
segue, yep.
I got that reference.
Exactly. So just a couple things that we were thinking about beforehand. Obviously, to Xavier's point a few weeks ago, how the consumer is still kind of pushing things forward with spending. We saw that again in the fourth quarter. Two interesting pieces of news, right? I saw a week ago, because the GDP number came out today. A week ago, I saw an article about how buy now, pay later hit its highest ever usage in the fourth quarter.
I think Nick had mentioned that at some point when he
Well,
was in the
we
show.
actually talked about it. Nick had mentioned it before we even had fourth quarter data on it. And tons of people were using buy now, pay later in the fourth quarter. So they were buying things and with the notion that they would pay for them in January, February, March, April, right? Of course, fourth quarter GDP, 3.3%. It's
a good number.
It's just a good number. A lot of that is being purchased by things that are going to have to
Yes.
be paid for in the first
and
quarter
and,
of this
and what's
year
what's
going
interesting is that you, Xavier, Nicholas, and myself, we've been talking about this a few times at work because we were noticing was like, come Christmas time, everyone's going to spend because no one wants to go cheap on Christmas presents, right? So you kind of had a feeling that it's like probably fourth quarter GDP number is probably going to be positive. The question is coming this next quarter GDP and maybe even the one following. Is there going to be some sort of backlash to the fact that everyone was spending, with these kind of like small borrow programs, and now they're going to eventually have to start paying it back?
At what point, the thing is, at what point when you're at the highest ever credit card debt, you have buy now, pay later, which is basically a way to push credit card debt into the future, and you have student loans resuming, 40% of which people have not begun to pay back. 40% of student loan people are already delinquent.
And some of those student loans are pretty hefty. I mean, I know a couple of people who are started repaying their student loans, and it's a pretty big number that it's forced them to think about having to take a second job.
Exactly.
So
at what point is your spending finally hit? At what point do you actually run out of, you've been fueling consumer spending by pulling out of 401ks, going into debt, using buy now, pay later. At what point can you not do it anymore? And that's the real question. Is it the first quarter? Is it next year? And at what point do people simply say, I have to stop because I literally have no more options and I have to cut down on something? So it's just interesting.
Yeah.
That I see that last week and this week I'm like, well, sure enough, people used buy now, pay later. They bought stuff. It shows up in consumer spending.
Yeah, and the prediction happens. Fourth quarter for 2023 GDP is going to be a good number, and it was. Now it's like big test is come
what
April.
happens going forward?
Exactly what that number is going to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just very interesting to see there. We had talked about it a little bit before the show started. The younger individuals, so nearly half of young adults say they are obsessed with being rich. This is their terms, not mine. Basically 46% of millennials, 44% of Gen Z, are very nervous about wanting to be wealthy.
Now, can I ask you a question? Does that article have a number in which they define wealthy?
No, which is an interesting.
Yes, because people have different views of what's wealthy. Because let's be honest, there was a very long time, where it's like if you made $100,000, you would be considered very wealthy, like really well-to-do, upper middle class. As inflation has gone up and we see housing prices go up and mortgage rates go up, this is getting to a point where $100,000 isn't necessarily the upper middle class, very wealthy number that it used to be.
If you live in Manhattan, it's not even close.
No, I mean,
you can't afford to live in Manhattan.
Yeah, to rent an apartment for a year is already probably $100,000.
Median income per household is $123,300.
There you go. Right
Wow.
here, median, which is like flat
average.
middle, 123,000.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, what exactly is the defining number for, I want to be rich? Because maybe they think, well, $200,000 a year is rich, but $2,000 might not be, $200,000 a year is not necessarily rich anymore. It may have been 20 years ago. You would have been like, oh yeah, you're borderline rich.
It sounds like it's a lot of it. What it is partly in part because we have such a social media culture that obviously the younger you are, the more you are on these things, you're seeing what wealthy people do more than ever, right? Think about if you were like living on a farm in 1920s. Do you know that John Rockefeller is taking a vacation to Europe every month? No, it's not. It's not. You're checking every day. It's not every day. Let me see what Rockefeller's up to today, right?
But
now, though, if you're on social media, you see every day what people you're following. If they are wealthy influencers, you see every single day. I went to Prague. I went to Amalfi yesterday.
And it's not just the rich people, because let's be honest, like you could say, Elon Musk went to this place. I mean, Elon Musk has wealth that you as a realistic person will realize you will never be able to attain. But I think it's the problem with social media is it creates these, you follow so many people that you see this other person, you're like, well, I'm kind of like that guy, or maybe I even know that guy. How do you take this vacation to this place? You know, like you mentioned, like the Amalfi Coast. They got a boat on,
Just go out and
exactly on the boat and they're swimming. But you have to be careful because sometimes that is literally those people's kind of, like you mentioned, their job, or it's all basically an image that they're trying to create of wealth. Because by trying to look wealthier, they're hoping to get more money. But sometimes it's not necessarily the case. They might not be making that much more money than you are.
That might be their one vacation in 4 years or something.
Exactly. Or some people have this really, really fancy car, and you're like, oh, wow, look how much fancy car. But they actually have $0 in a 401k. They have $0 in an IRA. They spent all their money on a fancy car to look wealthier than you. And then hoping by like looking wealthier than you, you're going to follow or buy their product. They say, hey, I got this, Porsche because I wear this shampoo. So I'm going to buy that shampoo because I want that Porsche. It's like, it's not correlated, but that's how kind of they make their money. So you have to be careful with that.
Exactly. I mean, Nick had a great comment. He was thinking the same thing before we even said it, that could it be that the desire to be rich might be social media driven rather than a financial decision?
I bet you, in most cases, I bet you that is the case. You just watch social media, it's like, Jim went to Prague this year for a week. How come I can't do that? He must be rich. But like you said, there are other factors that could be determining that. Maybe he doesn't do any other vacation at all. Maybe he didn't save any money. Maybe he used a pay now, buy now, pay later program. I mean, a lot of people have done that too. I mean, we've noticed sometimes like in vacations, there's a lot of younger people and you hear about their struggle with credit card debt and you're like, how could so many young people be on vacation if they're all in debt? Well, because they're just putting on more debt. It's like, well, I don't want to skip my vacation. I want to put this on Instagram. And
exactly. And I think for me that comes down to when you say, because I think when people, especially younger people, when you say you want to be wealthy, the question I always have is, you need to narrow it down to what is your real goal, because the things which make you wealthy in the long term, right, are, for lack of a better term, the unsexy things, right? So it's the opposite of leisure now, travel now, buying things now. It is the number one thing you could do to become wealthy is save money early, right? It's the most powerful thing. You start. We ran this when the Roth IRA was $6,000 a year, the most you could put into it. But you put $6,000 a year into your Roth IRA from age 22 to 30. In other words, that's $500, which is not cheap. That's $500 a month. Every year from 22 to 30, that's $500 you could use to go on vacation, to, you know what I mean? 500, obviously 6,000 a year you could
Of
use
course.
to go on vacation, buy things, do
But
something else
I
with
know
your
where you're
car.
going with this. Yes.
If you do that for those 8 years and you never save another penny, you have $750,000 by the time you are
Yeah.
retired at 68, right? So, and this was like the 67, 68 retirement age. So, yeah, you can become wealthy. You can get $750,000 in the bank
Yeah.
at 67 if what you do is save $6,000 a year for 8 years, starting at age 22, and then you never save another penny.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not the thing. You can't put that on Instagram, right? That's not the thing that doesn't appear anywhere. It doesn't appear as a car. It doesn't appear as increased leisure time. It doesn't appear as a vacation. It's a hidden thing which results in you being wealthy.
Yeah, because wealth is also about kind of what you own. Like you say, you have retirement accounts, or maybe you own a house. None of these, especially certain houses, if you're younger, you're not going to have a.
You're not going to put your townhome on Instagram and say,
Exactly.
look at my
new townhome. No,
1,500 square foot
exactly.
town-
Yeah, you want
Yeah.
to show off a fancy house. So you're like, well, I don't have that house. But the point is, you have to start small. The problem is, symbols of wealth sometimes are depreciating assets, not appreciating assets. So, for example, you could buy a Rolex watch that's $50,000 and say, look at me. But guess what? That Rolex might not be jumping in price. You could get a
The
really
moment you
fancy
buy it,
car.
it's not worth $50,000.
Exactly. You could buy a car. And think about it, the minute you buy that new $70,000 Porsche, it's already depreciating in assets, but you're going to look rich because you're like, I got the watch, I got the car. You know, you
Exactly.
could even buy the same thing, a really fancy suit, or how you dress. You will look wealthy, but what you're wearing now is already decreasing in value.
Exactly. Well, I always talk about it, like every time like you hear about net wealth numbers in America, right? What percent of people have net wealth and so forth. And I always say to people, net wealth, like wealth is can be a deceiving number, because if you, and I always use this example, if you, let's say you own a house and you own a car and you own some stuff, you have some money, but you've got $1 million of debt because your house is underwater, your car is worth less than what you borrowed it, but you're sitting there with $1 million of debt between mortgage, credit card debt, all this stuff. And that debt is greater than let's say you have $800,000 of assets, but $1 million of debt. You are wealthier than a homeless guy on the street with $5 in his pocket and no debt. Because his net wealth is $5.
Yeah.
Your net wealth is minus 200, right? Do you feel like the homeless guy with $5 is wealthier than you? Not really, right? So there are things which are not producing wealth for you. They're not making you wealthier, but they make you feel wealthier, right? So it's an interesting. Told me so. It's funny. Nicholas has a comment. He says he's been told a lot of Gen Z and millennials are buying smart stuff and cars because they've given up on owning a home. So they decided it's not worth it to save. So it's like you said, it's that transition to, well, I don't think I can have a real asset, so I'm going to buy things which give the appearance and the feeling of wealth. Yeah. But those are two contradictory things. So you often have to decide. Because you could sit there. There's nothing wrong. There's an old movie. I forget what it's called. There's an old movie with Cary Grant, essentially based on this topic, where he decides that he's going to blow all his money and enjoy his youth, and then work into old age.
The Amazing Adventure?
No, it might be called Vacation or something. I can't remember. It's not The Amazing Adventure, but it's a movie with him and I believe it's Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, but I forget what the name of the movie is. I'm not 100% sure.
The one with the cheetah?
No, it's not the one with the cheetah. It's a different one. But where he basically decides to do that. He's like, I'm going to quit my job, burn all my money now because I want to enjoy youth, and then I'll just deal with it in retirement. And nobody around him can understand this decision, right? And if you want to do that, look, I mean, by all means, you will not become wealthy. You will be the opposite of wealthy.
Yes.
If your goal is wealthy, then it often is the opposite of what you may see on social media. The things which make you become wealthy. And if you want to become wealthy at 40, right, if you want to retire in your 30s, then you probably got to do what the guy I once read about, that he basically ate Chef Boyardee cans for his entire 20s, right, and lived in a 200 square foot, 500 square foot tiny apartment. And then, yes, you will become wealthy by 40, but you will not feel wealthy in your entire 20s.
Exactly, yeah. And then you're going to have backaches and then knee problems and then you can't do this or you can't go here. And you're like, what?
Exactly. So it's a lot of it is
You
balance.
all have gut issues because you didn't.
Exactly. Exactly. So a lot of it is you have to think about what you mean by wealthy and how you want to. Nick has the movie's called Holiday.
Holiday.
It's the movie called Holiday.
Oh, that one. Okay.
It's not the cheetah, but it's
Yes, I know. Holiday. Okay,
Holiday.
yeah. Well, that's the one where he's going to marry the rich lady, right?
Yeah, Katharine Hepburn. Yeah.
Well, no, he's not going to marry Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn's her sister. He's married.
Oh,
engaged
he's
to
married
someone
somebody else. Yes.
Yes.
Yep. The 1938 film
Okay.
called Holiday, which
Got
is
it.
basically exactly about that. So it's you
Yeah,
have
but
to
but
decide.
it's easy because of that one they have money. So
Yeah, but
you-
he's gonna blow his money.
yeah, but it's easy to blow what you have versus
Yeah.
like it's not, you
Go
can't
into
blow
debt.
something you don't have.
Exactly,
You can't be
you
like
go
I'm
into
going to
debt.
spend it, and it's like well you have no money. How can you live a life
Exactly.
of luxury for 20
Go
years?
into deep debt
Yeah.
to do it.
Well,
But essentially, you have to make those. You have to make that decision.
I'm just curious what exactly to get into the minds of millennials and Gen Z people what their definition now of wealthy really is.
I would be
You know,
interested
is
to
it
know
just
that.
owning a house? Is it owning like a
Well,
two-story
like I said,
house?
some of them have given up on a house.
Yeah, so
They're redefining what
you
wealthy
know,
may look like.
I'm curious whether they're trying to jump a step, like they're trying to get from point A to point D without realizing you have to
Go
go to point B and C
E.
first. You know,
Exactly, that's a great point.
but I think there is, unfortunately, I think there is a slight problem with the economy, which you do see where I think our jobs and the wages that they're being paid have not necessarily kept up
They've
with
not kept
inflation.
up
and
with
pri-
inflation.
So I think for a lot of Gen Z millennials, they have a common gripe where they're like, you know, I'm working. For example, for some people, I'm working at like a Walmart, and it's like I can't afford rent, I can't afford groceries, and this is a problem because again, it's not like the problem is necessarily like, oh, well, you can't live on a Walmart job. Well, people used to live working at grocery stores all their lives in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even to the 90s. Now it's becoming a problem because, again, the prices have jumped up so high. People are like, well, wait a second. They told me to just, if you take this job, you can live comfortably, but
And
I
now I
can't live
can't.
comfortably. I have to do more. Now I got to work 2 jobs. So they feel like they're at a disadvantage, and I don't think there's been a lot of solutions for people to kind of fix that.
Well, like Jerry just told us, you know, median income area 120. If a home, if the best you can do at for your first time home is $400,000, you have to work almost 4 years.
And that's the medium, and
That's
and
the
there's some
median.
and there's some wealthier people in the Charlottesville area that I'm sure
Or
have.
maybe below the median.
What was that?
I mean, you could be if you're making 100,000 a year, but you're below the median.
Yeah.
And you're working, you would have to save your entire salary for 4 years.
yeah.
So it's just certain things have also gone up.
Mm-hmm.
Home prices higher than inflation. So I think you're exactly right. They're seeing the challenge of working really hard doesn't always translate now into being actually able to succeed.
No, it's very difficult. So
So you can definitely
you know, and
understand
I think that's also why we're seeing some of the credit card numbers so high.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the other last topic I just wanted to cover, to Xavier's point, we had talked a couple weeks ago. New Year, a lot of articles come out. Oh my goodness, people are going to get all these RMDs, required minimum distributions this
It's
year
terrible.
because the stock market went up, right?
Terrible.
In their 401ks. And you're like, the tax you pay on an RMD, even if it was like 20%, I think I would rather get 80% of more money than
Yeah.
than 100% of less money. Seeing a lot of similar ones about Social Security now. So Social Security cost of living adjustment, which is Social Security, basically they're paying you Social Security 8.7% more this year than last year if you receive Social Security. The amount of Social Security that is exempt from being taxed never changes. It hasn't changed in like 20 years. So what happens is there may be a small group of people that, because they're making 8.7% more Social Security, will be pushed into the category where some of their Social Security will be taxed. Right now, only 85% can ever be taxed. So the government never taxes 100% of your Social Security. They would tax 85% of what is over the threshold. So I'm sitting there saying, this sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing.
Yeah. It's like someone like, you go and you're like, oh, last year I paid $15,000 in income tax. Now this year I'm going to pay $20,000. And you'll be like, well, why? Did the rate go up? No, I made $25,000 more. Well, then that's a good thing. You should be like, oh, look, this is terrible. You're going to pay $5,000 more. Yeah, but you made more money. So,
Exactly.
You got to look
So,
at the bright side.
Exactly. So, I mean, even if, let's say, of your 8.7% increase, let's say it's $140 a month on average, right? And they're going to tax all of it at 20%, right? So you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, now I got to pay, $21 more. I got to pay $21 more in taxes. I'm like, I think I'd rather have $140 more and pay $21 in taxes. So net, I only get $119. I think I'd rather have $119 more than have no more money with the satisfaction that I'm not paying anything to the government.
Well, yeah, it's like, I mean, what's like I don't remember the exact income tax bracket, but it's like, would you rather, if you made $50,000, you'd pay this amount of taxes, but if you made $150,000, you paid this amount. Well, I don't want to pay that amount of tax. But wouldn't you rather have the
$150,000 exactly.
Exactly. It's like if you gave someone just the amount of money they'd have to pay in taxes, people would be like, oh, give me the lower one. I'm like, yeah, but you're making less money, because if you're paying that little, you're not making a lot of
Exactly.
money. In reality, I want to be paying $1 million in taxes to the
Then
government.
you're making just
I'm
tons of
sure I'm
money.
making that point $100 million or whatever it is. So yeah,
Exactly. So there are things in life which Xavier and I would call good problems to have. Your Social Security going up by 8.7% and you now having to pay a little tax on it is a good problem. So don't be scared.
Exactly.
Like when you see these articles, you might think, oh my goodness, I'm going to have less money. Do the math, realize you will still have more money this year than last year. You won't have as much as you might think if you just looked at the increase, but you will have more money. So Social Security cost of living adjustment going up is a good thing, and it's a necessary thing given inflation that we've seen. So don't be scared by these kinds of articles. Just talk to someone who knows what they're doing. Your financial advisor will know. Your accountant will probably know. There are people, talk to people who know and help them, get them to help you understand what's going on, because it doesn't make sense to be scared by clickbait.
And a lot, and these people, they're very misleading in their articles and their headlines,
What is the headline? Things will be, you will receive more money in Social Security this year.
Nobody reads the
clicks
article.
it.
Yeah.
You could be hit with a terrible tax bill this year.
Exactly.
Oh, I got to see this. I got to see what it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always like that. The news is always negative. It's like old lady wins lotto, nobody clicks. Like old lady gets,
Hit by a
mysterious disappears. You're clicking. It's like, how does she disappear?
Exactly.
And all she did was, go to the doctor a day and came back. But it's terrible. Yeah, I
Exactly.
just hate the way they have to manipulate headlines. It's like, oh, good stuff happening. How can I make this bad?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
What's the negative in this? So just be aware of it, and I think make sure people know about it. So that's what I had, finance topic.
No, I think that was good. It was good to kind of give people a little feel of what's kind of going on so far to start
you've seen out there.
2024.
Exactly. So it's been a great show. Learned a lot.
Yes.
Tremendously. You're going to be going to dreamfootfarm.com once the show
I
is
know,
over.
exactly. Yes, I know.
Learn more
No,
about it.
Ben was a great guest. He kind of gave us a good insight into the raw milk. Like I was curious too how the process of collecting the raw milk, how they kind of going through
True.
the stainless steel and kind of getting,
What-
not frozen but kind of cooled off very quickly. Because not that I said it can't be just like,
You just,
put a
squeeze
bucket,
it.
shoop, put it in the bottom.
Yeah.
And I said, there's got to be something else. But it was interesting how this kind of like
How
a
it works.
cleansing process, a filter, so you're not really drinking it directly from the cow. Though I forgot to ask him whether he's actually done that.
I don't know if anybody- yeah.
Because he said actually the milk comes out like, what is it, like 110 degrees.
That must be like
Yeah.
really warm.
So it's got to be really warm,
Yeah, that's
so that's
interesting.
interesting.
That would be neat to find out if anyone's that does that.
Oh, I'm sure someone
I'm sure
does.
some people do it.
Probably don't want to do it too often because, like he says, there's a lot of stuff. It's
Yeah.
coming from a cow, so
Yeah, exactly.
they sit in mud and poop. Yeah. Hey, milk's got a funny taste, right? That's why you filter it and
Exactly.
go
That's why they clean it so much. Absolutely. Well, I also like the business model. How you navigate what is not an easy environment for what you want to sell, and you figure out ways to do it and do
Exactly.
the share and the.
You're not buying the milk. You're getting
paying
a
him
You're
to
paying
deliver
him.
milk from a cow that you own a part of,
Exactly.
which is really interesting. Next week, I got some more great guests. We're going to be joined by Dr. Eduardo Castro and Kelly Tortas from Castro integrative medicine or integrative medicine,
Interesting.
however you want to pronounce it. So that'll be coming on the show next week. It should be a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it'll be you or if Xavier will be back, but we'll find out.
Well, we'll find out. We'll keep everyone in suspense.
Exactly. Always appreciate being here.
No, I'm happy to be here.
with
Alex.
you. Always appreciate Judah behind the camera. Jerry giving us some financial data live
Exactly.
on air. Love it. All our great guests. Thank you all so much for tuning in this morning. Thanks, of course, to Emergent Financial Services, to Castle Hill Cider, Credit Serious Insurance, Matias Young Realty, Forward Adelante. Thanks to all of you for joining us today, for your questions, comments. Be sure to check us out next week. We look forward to seeing you then. But until that time, as we like to close it out, hasta mañana.